Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're going week to week, breaking down a streaming favorite, providing some context along the way. In today's episode, we'll be breaking down the 14th episode, just one more to go after this one, 14th episode of The Pitt on HBO Max, a very quiet penultimate episode to this season, nowhere near the action-packed finale we had of last season, but allows for some reflection, especially about Robbie's headspace in the current moment. Also on the podcast, we'll be breaking down the finale of DTF St. Louis, also on HBO. We'll be checking in with the season premiere after 4 years away of the third season of Euphoria, and also continuing to cover Your Friends and Neighbors here on the podcast, plus many upcoming releases. Beef, the second season of Beef. Susie, I know you requested this. We are indeed going to cover Beef. Probably Kim and I will touch on the premiere episode, maybe 1 or 2 episodes. These are 30-minute episodes, by the way. It is a binge, so it's going to be a little hard to watch the whole entire thing. But in our finale discussion about The Pitt, Kim and I will touch on the premiere episode of Beef as well and talk about season 1, and then probably circle back to it in the subsequent week, bringing Darren in on the conversation to discuss that as well. I've been asking for one call to action per week. How about this week? Drop us an email, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. And here's the announcement I was teasing. We'll be launching a Patreon this week, everybody. We're launching the Patreon. And I've been wanting to revisit older shows and maybe go week to week in shorter episodes on the Patreon, which temporarily will be available to everybody, by the way. So I'll have a lot more details once the page goes live, but I've been wondering what show should I cover. I was thinking about the X-Files, maybe rewatching The Sopranos, just 2 possible options. So I ask you, dear listeners, to let me know which shows you would prefer, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. And if you prefer to contact via the comments on Spotify, any way is fine. This is just a very informal poll, and I'll leave it open for the next couple of weeks at least. But do reach out if you do hear this message and let me know what show would you like us to rewatch and break down week to week on the Patreon. We are very tired here. We have just returned from vacation and a very eventful vacation. My daughter got very sick, but in the end, it all worked out and we had a very pleasant time. We luckily did not get sick, although this seemed to be something contagious. So miraculously, we did not all get sick. So we're getting this episode out to you. And then I'm going to go to sleep very early. So I'll be nice and fresh tomorrow to watch a bunch more shows so we can start recording those episodes to get them out on Monday or Tuesday. All right, enjoy the episode. And once again, reach out to us with your preferred rewatch series. Okay, so everybody, we are publishing a little later than we expected. Just flew in today, this very early flight. So theoretically, we could have actually published about where we usually did, but we needed to sleep and unpack and eat and watch the show as well, because we hadn't had a chance to see it. And our poor daughter, sweet daughter, had gotten sick during our trip to Sarasota.
She's recovered, luckily. But we did have our first ever ER visit, which was very mellow compared to the television version.
Not quite as chaotic.
Thank God.
Yeah, I thought we were going to have to wait out in the waiting room for a couple of hours, like on The Pitt. It seems like watching the show, The Pitt that is, that those people in the waiting room, no wonder Dana got punched last year. They never seem to make it in. It's just like all those people are sitting there waiting. And then someone that knows Robbie or a relative shows up or some emergency shows up or some chaotic thing happens. And those people in the waiting room are just waiting in the waiting room for the whole entire length of the show.
What was so annoying about sitting in the waiting room, and it wasn't that long of a time, it was only an hour, but there were people who clearly did not appear to be having emergencies. One woman was like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich while she was waiting. Another guy was just like talking on the phone. Really? Is it that you're here for?
For primary care. That's what they're there for.
Perhaps. We got a few nursing home drop-offs, people in wheelchairs in their hospital gowns.
Well, yeah, that's that we do see that on ER. I mean, on this show, shouldn't say ER as well. Okay, so on the show itself, we are now in the 14th hour of 15, so we only have one more week. This is the shortest episode of the season, written by Noah Wyle. He's written quite a few of these episodes, actually. And some of the more dramatic episodes of last season, for example, were written by Wyle himself. This is relatively uneventful And as I mentioned, the shortest episode of the season, and really surprising to me that this is the setup for the finale. I know that we didn't get I assume that they don't want to repeat themselves and have every single season be like some kind of catastrophe comes in the 11th hour. And maybe there is still something to come next week. Doesn't seem to be based on the trailer for next week, but they could be hiding something. So there's always a possibility they have one more trick up their sleeves. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if this ends up being just a mellow more realistic ending, like the changing of the guard, the momentum, I should say, is changing. And these are folks who are getting ready to go back home and unpacking the day and having some kind of interpersonal conflict. So this is probably a more realistic version, although people probably wouldn't linger this long in between shifts. But aside from that, this is probably a more realistic version of a change of shift, but not the most compelling episode of the season, I have to say, although there were some, emotional high points here. We have some very important points to bring up. But how did you feel about this as like a setup for a finale of season 2? Only the second season of this show.
This is more of an emotional, catastrophic episode for Dr. Robbie because he can't leave. He can't leave his shift. He is lingering now into hour 14, and he's clearly getting upset and talking about his emotions, and people are addressing him, individually about his plan for leaving. And Dana wants an intervention. She has a bad feeling something's going to happen. And obviously, Dr. Robbie also has a bad feeling that something's going to happen because he says so. So I felt very sad watching this. It was very depressing, really.
And I guess that's the point of the episode, is to kind of allow us to hone in on that. It's interesting that we've been saying over and over again throughout the season that it seems like Robbie is possibly self-destructive, minimally, maybe suicidal, that it is the strain of the work that is undoing him. But we discover here, the most important thing that happens in the entire episode is the discovery that he actually feels purposeful when he's at work, which is why he's such a workaholic.
This is why he can't actually leave his shift. He's like still seeing new patients.
Right. Because this is how he defines himself. But not only that, and this explains so much when you think about how he puts so much on his shoulders and how he's so overly invested in the students and the other doctors, and this revelation this week with this new doctor, who's going to be a regular, by the way, on the show, but from the other shift, that she says to Langdon that Langdon has been seeing this whole thing as Robbie doesn't want me back. And instead, it's like, no, you don't know Robbie. She was saying that she worked with him while Langdon were gone for 10 months. We worked side by side. And the reality, he puts everything on his back. So he thought he failed you, that he did a bad job. He puts all that onus on himself. Now, the irony there is he is overly investing in work. And I think we know people like this, overly invested in work, because that is how he defines his value. And because he has nothing outside of work, without the realization that he has nothing outside of work because he is so overly invested in work. So it's like a chicken and egg situation here, and pretty fascinating, but also sad because he obviously needs to get help.
Yeah, he clearly needs to get help. And his only thought on how to get help is to go on this trip. What the outcome is
that the intention, though? To get help, or yeah?
No, that's not the intention. His intention is to say, I'm going to sever my ties with the world. That's the way I can disconnect, is like physically leaving the world. So this is not healthy. The psychiatrist who's there also knows this is not healthy. Stay in touch with me, he says, but he needs more than that. He needs like an inpatient psychiatric admission.
It's interesting. Yes. And it's also interesting that every perspective we've seen so far this season of him being at the end of his rope and everyone perceiving him this way is from his coworkers. So we see that Dana perceives this, Langdon is perceiving it, and apparently there's a confrontation between the two of them specifically about this that is teased in the coming attractions for next week. And you see that in multiple ways he's been called out, even by subordinates who think that just something is off with him. And the people who know him the most are most concerned about him. The psychiatrist, of course, is aware of it as well. And it's interesting that, and McKay, of course, sees symptoms that she saw in other addicts. So there's some kind of addictive aspect to his self-flatulation or whatever it happens to be. And there is all of that, but that's from inside of his coworker's perspective. And now we have Duke, who is practically the only person we've seen outside the scope of the hospital. I guess we also saw like that ex-girlfriend last year. And of course, that's the whole disaster at Pitt Gate and his somewhat, father figure to this boy whose girlfriend died because he wasn't able to rescue her. Not his fault, obviously, because of the gunshot wound she suffered during that shooting. But that's like the only other hint we have of an external life outside of his coworkers. Even his affair is with another member of staff in the hospital. But then we see Duke, who's his friend from outside, and Duke sees that he is also at the end of his rope and is also questioning what is the real purpose of this bike ride. So it seems to be that he has been signaling not only at work, but across the board that he's unwell. And
and Duke even says, what you're describing is not a ride. What was the term he used? Neither one of us can recall the exact word he used, but this isn't a ride, this is an end or something like that. So yes, Duke recognizes what's going on. But he's still going to sit there and fix his bike. During the episode, the ambulance knocks Robbie's bike over, breaks the mirror, and loosens something on the handlebar. And if Duke really didn't want him to go, he would have not been helping him fix it in real time in the ER parking lot here. But he wants to help him also. Well,
it's also interesting that Robbie just wants the bike to be good enough, not to be fully operational, but just good enough to get on the road, because he's basically overtly saying, I'm just going to ride this as long as it lasts. So a damaged bike doesn't really bother him as long as it's operational. And as is often the case with the show, you have these characters that are on different trajectories, some going up, some going down. And Robbie, of course, has been on this very uneven trajectory, mostly going down this entire season. Langdon, on the other hand, has been mostly back, trying to do his reparations, and has actually had a pretty successful day, despite the fact that he's been walking on eggshells the whole entire time, primarily because of Robbie. But then he messed up last week. He missed something. I had also earlier messed up and missed the infection in the foot, although that wasn't necessarily his fault.
Yeah, that was the necrotizing fasciitis, so I can't blame him for missing that. But he does redeem himself medically in this episode with this cervical spine injury, which no ER doctor would ever do in a million years, but it's good TV.
Well, my question to you. So that's a big question I have for you, obviously. So in this particular case where you literally have Langdon saying, I have seen this procedure being done before, and Robbie's like, I have never done it before, so it's all up to you. But then goading him into doing it, he's trying to get his confidence up again. So this is kind of the cowboy thing. They literally call it a cowboy move on the show. It's the kind of cowboy thing that Robbie likes, which is not necessarily always positive in this regard. There's a lot of cavalier procedures here in the ER, which makes you think that a lot of these people have this go for broke mentality, which is why they like this to be in this life and death situation, literally saving lives in a way that some other branches of medicine, with elective surgeries and such, it's not always like this kind of, I'm here in the moment at this person's worst moment and I'm rescuing them, which is the whole other complex that obviously, or I should say, Robbie probably does also suffer from that. But on top of all of that is the fact that he's now doing this procedure he's never done before. He's just seeing it for the first time. But I wanted to ask you specifically in this situation, given all the caveats of what we see here, that the compression of the spinal column is happening. This guy's literally losing not only his sense to his extremities, but he's going to fail to be able to breathe. So this could be death or severe paralysis. Does it make sense that in the moment?
He has a high cervical cord injury and he starts to become short of breath, in addition to what you just said, where he's got lower extremity paresis. And
a weak grip too.
Yes, he's weak everywhere. So his cord is compromised. I think it was technically C3. And they should have shown us the imaging for his neck, which they didn't. I didn't even see that they did imaging, but they must have gotten a CAT scan. I don't know how they did that so quickly. Or it was an x-ray and they could tell the facets were dislocated. So he does a chiropractic maneuver to realign the facet joints of his neck to get the cord compression off of the spinal cord. No way. No way people would even diagnose that from an x-ray or attempt to treat it themselves. where it's like, we don't have 5 minutes to wait for the neurosurgeon. Crazy.
But do you think do you believe that a neurosurgeon would have done the procedure? Possibly, right? If he got there.
I've never heard of a neurosurgeon doing a C-spine manipulation for a cord injury. All right, the neck is unstable. You take him to the operating room and you stabilize it with hardware so that you prevent it from causing the compression by putting screws and fusing it, whatever you have to do to stabilize it. But I've never heard of a neurosurgeon just doing a manipulation.
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious. I mean, and insane. It seems like it.
Insane. I'm like, oh great. My heart fell into my stomach. I'm like, Langdon his life is over. His career is over. He's gonna get sued without a doubt, whether or not this goes well or not. I was figuring it was gonna go badly, but thank God it didn't. But in reality, do no harm and CYA. We all practice CYA medicine. Cover your ass. Meaning you don't do things off the cuff. You do things that are within your training and within your realm of expertise.
Yeah, so that's my question to you. So how are we supposed to read this? Do you think the show is supposed to make us look at that and say, wow, Langdon, redeemed himself he did in the eyes of Robbie. He's like, good job. The first time he gives him a approving comment, the entire episode, or I should say the entire season. And what do you think not what Robbie's perception is? Do you think that the show's aligned with Robbie, that he did a good job because he rescued that guy? Everybody in the operating room seems to be like, wow, that worked. Congratulations. He would have probably been paralyzed if we hadn't done anything either. And that's the risk that we were attributing to the procedure going wrong. I mean, it could kill him too, I guess. But I guess he could have died also waiting for procedure to happen, the other more conservative procedure. So are we supposed to read that as all like a victory? Or are we supposed to see that this is more of the type of cavalier behavior that Robbie is instituting into these people, maybe incorrectly? And we do see it, right? We see like Langdon is overinvested. I mean, Langdon takes this Cowboy procedure here, but not only that, we have Whitaker, for example, who's overinvested in his patients and is again getting patted on the back by Robbie. I mean, I do wonder if the show is aware of its own point of view, like that it's maybe too simpatico to Robbie, or maybe not. Maybe it wants us to draw our own conclusions that this is maybe not the right decision to make in that moment. Or in general, there's a lot of other procedures here too that seem to be like, you've called it out here in a podcast, that this would not be a traditional procedure that an ER doctor would ever even attempt.
Yeah, I mean, this goes along with what we've seen previously, is that these ER physicians are doing surgical procedures and other procedures that are not in the scope of their practice necessarily, or not in the scope of a reality ER level trained physician. So this is fantasy. This is television. I think these things also help you feel how much these physicians are putting themselves on the line every day, and how no wonder they're all stressed out, and no wonder they all have their own issues with suicidal ideation, cutting, drug use, etc., because you're putting your career on the line every hour of the day. Who can live like that? So I think this is kind of just allowing them to function this way so that you feel like these people are really vested in their work and stressed.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that it's interesting because I'm not always sure what the point of view of the show itself is, not of the characters, but of the show, in whether it's approving of this behavior or not. Because I mentioned it when we were recapping season 1 as well, that there is that moment when everybody's coming in and these bodies are just everywhere and it's an absolute nightmare and everybody's, completely drowning and everyone's out of their depth and freaking out. And then they start improvising and then they start like solving their problems and then they start saving lives. And then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we did this. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's try this. Let's try this. Like towards the end, they could easily send these. They're like, we have operating rooms open now. And they're just like high-fiving and trying new things out. It's just like, whoa. So I do wonder if the show is trying to say something there, that it's like, you need to have that willingness, that daring to do a procedure and potentially save a life. But there are downsides to that as well. There's some danger in this kind of cavalier behavior here potentially.
Yeah, I mean, this is an extreme portrayal of how physicians would act during work. So I think it's good TV because it makes it more exciting. But I'm not exactly sure what what their point is, as you mentioned.
Yeah, because I think the show shows both things, and maybe it's not judging it at all, because I think back on the episode with the woman who has the necrotizing fasciitis in her leg, and where, after waiting for a consult and everything, and they're like, okay, now we have to take her to get an MRI or whatever. And Robbie just cuts her leg open and goes, look, it's obviously, I've proven my diagnosis, now get to the surgery. And me, watching that, I was happy. Like, sometimes I don't like him overreaching with his behavior, but in that regard, I felt from the perspective of sometimes like bureaucracy being in the way of basically, okay, now we got to go through proper channels. And it's like, this lady's going to lose her leg. I mean, she's already going to lose her leg. She might lose more than her leg if you guys don't start doing something very quickly, instead of being like, okay, we'll wait for her to get an MRI, and then we'll read the MRI, and all that adds another 15 or 20 minutes to this, when this thing is obviously spreading very quickly. So I think the show is probably trying to show both the good and bad of this type of behavior.
Yeah, I agree.
Of course, it's not great for Robbie's mental health. And as we mentioned, again, if we think about this family of doctors that he's shepherding, that he's not always instilling the best behavior in these people who are having problems coping in many ways. You have Whitaker being overly invested outside of work with these patients. Very funny that he ends up,
calling a Lyft for the lady.
Who ends up like using racial terms against the driver, and he has to now pay $250. I love, by the way, he says that, well, there goes my check for the week. Now that he's finally got his first check, I'm like, I hope he's not making $250 a week as a doctor. That better not be. I mean, I know that ER doctors don't get paid that much, but that's very bad. He could go to Starbucks and make more money.
He is severely underpaid. But yeah, that's another comment on like, how vested are you in your patients? There has to be a line. Like, you can't call a Lyft for someone and put your credit card information out and allow them just to go on your dime when something bad can happen. So all of your decisions have consequences. That's pretty much the point of that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that, these episodes oftentimes have broader themes, and I think one of them here is like when to, we've seen it over and over the course of the season, but very much, when do you intervene? When do you not? When do you get into, beyond the scope of the patient in the hospital and things that you can't possibly control? And of course, we've seen Whitaker go too far, and we see the wear that it's causing on Robbie. And again, in a more comedic way, the fact that he's like, I'll get you a lift. And it's just like, you know what? At some point, you got to stop working.
Yeah, just call the social worker. They'll help you find a ride. Don't do it yourself. You cannot do all these things yourself.
Yes, the hospital probably has some kind of service. Just let her wait for that service if she really can't get any other ride home.
And that's why these people will never leave their shift.
And Robbie never wants to leave his shift.
They just keep going and going.
Of course, another huge revelation comes with Dr. Al-Hashimi, but we'll save that for the end, because that's kind of the button on the episode, which is a weird cliffhanger for sure. Of all the cliffhangers they've had, that's one of the oddest. But before we get there, let's talk about Langdon a little bit more. So he has this kind of redemption arc this week, specifically with Robbie. He was brought low last week, kind of lost his confidence. Mel gave him a pep talk because he had missed the collapsed lung with that asthmatic patient. And I want to ask you about that patient as well. But he kind of gets a little boost of confidence, and then he can't even really pump his fist and appreciate that Robbie has not berated him one more time, taking that opportunity one more time, that he immediately gets called upstairs because he missed his drug test for the day. So immediately undercuts with the reality of the situation that he's still on probation.
Yeah, you cannot miss your drug test because you're going to be kicked out of work if you violate your probation.
And of course, he runs into Whitaker there as well. And Whitaker and Langdon actually have that conversation. Yet another complexity to this whole thing, that first of all, that he's taking, his back got tweaked at some point when he was carrying the kid that was overheated. Langdon, that is. And Whitaker sees him taking some Tylenol. He goes, oh, don't worry, it's only Tylenol. And then he starts to be like, hey, Advil. He's like, hey, buddy. And he's just like, I'm not your little buddy. And then he starts going on some jag about the professor and Marianne, Skipper too.
Oh yeah, like what's my role here?
I'm not little buddy. I'm not Gilligan. The captain. I like how he's like, yeah, you're right, because the skipper is. But the skipper, the skipper was like kind of an idiot on that show, though, right? So not as much of an idiot as Gilligan. So I'm not sure who was really in charge on that island. It's a good point. Because the professor was kind of a goofball too.
You're right. No one was really in charge, really.
Mary Ann was really carrying all that water. Who's Ginger in this metaphor?
Oh, that doesn't seem to be a Ginger character. It's a Santos is the scorn Ginger.
There was an article that came out recently, and they were talking about how USC, this show is actually shot in Los Angeles, one of the few shows that are fully produced in Los Angeles, because it's all shot on sets that they've built to be reusable. But they were talking about a couple of things. One is it's interesting that I've been critical of the show being so well written in the subtle ways it parallels things that are happening in characters without being too on the nose, and developing these characters without ever having them have the big melodramatic outside of the ER moments. So it's really, really elegant in that way. And then really so ham-fisted in so many ways when it's trying to put this messaging in, which is always where I think that the show is the least subtle. And I actually don't mind any of the kind of political points and even like just the social points that they bring up. I think they should be addressed. It's just so unsubtle. And then I read this article and I found it really interesting that there was like a study at USC talking about these are like the most pressing issues in the medicine today in the United States medical system, and just in general with aging populations. And we have an issue that I'm about to bring up here about putting the EKG contacts on
the EKG leads were misplaced, so they did not diagnose the ST elevation MI in that woman.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that case in more detail, but what's so fascinating about it is that the USC article that was written gave them like guidelines that these are the issues you should be hitting in your scripts. And it's so, once I read that, it like gave me such clarity in how clunky some of the stuff in the show is handled. It really felt like, and then we're going to talk about this thing, talk about these plot points, and they interjected them into the scripts, and it's not subtly integrated at all.
Yeah, the comment with that case was like a lot of women are like misdiagnosed when they're having a heart attack because their symptoms are not typical. They'll come in with shoulder pain, abdominal pain. They won't have the classic left-sided chest pain, which is true. Women don't present the same way as men in some cases. But in this specific episode, it was about EKG placement. And because of her chest, they didn't put the leads on in the right way. I don't think that is the reason why women are misdiagnosed. It's because their symptoms are not quite the same. So this was a comment on that, which is a good point to be made, but maybe in a different way. And then Robbie, of course, is calling out these poor EMTs in the middle of the hospital, telling them that they're idiots and they could have killed this woman.
I think obviously absolutely correct that like we talked about it, or we even overlooked it in our coverage, that like sometimes women's pain is not identified correctly or managed correctly. So that is obviously a very important point that they address in a pretty clunky way in an earlier episode. But I specifically in this one, the whole idea that they're placing the EKGs in the wrong place because they don't want to move the woman's bosoms out of the way, basically, which, like you said, I don't think it's the primary reason, but I think it's just drawing the attention once again that oftentimes you have like these male EMT drivers, and they're probably not wanting to overly fondle the patient, and they make mistakes like this.
Yeah, I mean, that was the comment that was made on the show, but I don't think that's like I said before, that's not the main reason why women are not diagnosed in the same way.
Now, these guys will be feeling up all their patients, and they're going to definitely get sexual harassment lawsuits. All because Robbie yelled it.
Yeah, that wasn't nice. I agree with the EMTs in this case. How about talk to us on the side instead of making a public display of our mistake?
I like the fact that after that whole thing happened, Hashimi walks over and goes, "I appreciate what you did, even though I would have handled it in a more subtle way."
Meanwhile, she's the one who was taking care of the patient and was like, "Oh, it's not an ST elevation, am I?" And then he looks at the leads on the woman's chest and he's like, "You need to redo this EKG." So basically that was her mistake.
Yeah. Also, I like the fact that she's like, "I would have done this in a different way. By the way, I need you as your second opinion on this other patient," where it's like her actual medical records are put up on the screen. And then he starts reading through it. And then we get to the solution to this mystery we've had, that she had, what was this? She had
So she was diagnosed with viral meningitis as a child and had seizures. Mm-hmm. And the show ended as he starts to read the beginning of her HPI. He stops reading and looks at her and realizes,
Baran, is this you?
Yes, realizes he's reading her chart. First of all, it's hour 14. Why are we showing our medical records to our colleague when everyone is like about to die of fatigue? We need to leave work.
Maybe because she thinks she's leaving here so she can like have this conversation as they leave. But
so now all of her moments of zoning out with the baby Jane and other moments in the show where she stops what she's doing, stares into space, and then excuses herself from the room and calls her doctor on the phone. So what she's having, I believe, is absence seizures, which are seizures that don't manifest with shaking like you'd normally see with a typical seizure. It is literally just zoning out, and it happens for a few seconds, and you don't have that post-ictal state. Like most patients who have seizures will have their episode and then they'll be confused and out of it for a while. In an absence seizure, you don't have that state. So you're out of it for 20 seconds and then you're back. So she can still function. And I think that is where we're going. And then in the previews for the next episode, he's commenting that maybe she's not fit to work here. So I'm like, what now is the point of this?
I mean,
just to make him not leave, because he can't leave the ER if someone's going to have a 20-second moment of zoning out during her shift.
My question, I mean, you probably don't know it. You've never encountered anybody who has this condition. And even if you had, you probably wouldn't have known it because they would just probably be like, oh, I was distracted for a few seconds. When you're not in a medical circumstance, you could probably get away with that. If you're just like zone out in the middle of a meeting, no one's going to say anything unless you're presenting in the moment. But the question I was going to ask you is how, like, I presume that this has to be part of her medical record. So she's been able to have this career and this job with her superiors and supervisors and such, knowing that she has the situation. But rather than keeping it under wraps, doesn't she have to announce this to everybody? Because if she has her hand in the patient and she has a 20-second seizure, people need to know that if she's in the middle of an actual procedure, someone needs to know that this could happen so that they can take control if they need to, right?
In theory, but you don't need to share your medical information with your colleagues. But if it's now incapacitating you at work, then you should have a different job.
I mean, if I'm a bus driver, people should know about this.
If you have seizure disorder that's not controlled, you can't drive a car.
Right.
So I would presume she's on medication and she is still having these episodes. I don't know how common it is in adults. Like absence seizures usually happen to kids. Yeah. And I'm not sure if it's a lifelong thing, honestly. I haven't managed seizure disorder long-term, but obviously it is a long-term problem for her.
Yeah. And I guess that maybe it is the stress of the job or the circumstance that it has presented more today because it happened twice. So at least twice. It might have been 3 times. So this is, and when it was just with the baby and she's zoning out for a few seconds, not that big a deal. But when she's actually, again, literally in the middle of a procedure, that's got to be extremely dangerous.
Yes, agreed. So she needs to go back to her neurologist and maybe change up her medications. I'm not sure.
Some other things that happen here just to kind of tie up this pretty quiet episode. Everybody's still scanning these charts in. How long does this really take? Does this take this long? They didn't have that many patients. I mean, we can literally count them over the course of this season. What is it, 50 patients maybe that we've seen?
Probably something like that. And now we've been doing this probably for the last episode and a half.
Hours.
Yes. So we're doing this for 2 hours and all of them look like they are done. They're like glazed over, feeding papers into a computer. And Santos is actually dictating some of these notes. I'm like, oh no, now we have to read. No. When the EMR is down, the EMR is down. You don't go back and dictate. Just scan it in. We need clerks. Get the clerks, pay them overtime, get the doctors out of there. Let the clerks do this. This is not a physician level job here.
I like how the new staff, like Abbott last week, was saying, no, you guys have to stay until that's scanned. But to your point, why wouldn't the hospital be like, we're going to bring you staff to handle this? I mean, the hospital literally made the decision earlier in the day that we're going to shut down all the networks without consulting with you guys because this is like a really big problem. And this is obviously outside the scope of what we've seen. But how did they not spend the last 12 hours, 14 hours, getting like just basic staff down there to help with this type of stuff? Like now that the computers are back on, make sure everything's operational. Like you're not gonna have the doctors be like, hey, make sure all the systems are operational. Have your own other technical staff handle this.
Yeah, the hospital administrators need to show up.
Right.
Where's that lady? We haven't seen her all season.
Gloria, where is she?
Where the hell's Gloria?
Yeah.
And the other guy who shows up in his like sailboat shorts to tell them that they're going offline.
Yeah.
Where's he? Should probably come back in.
He's back on his boat.
He needs to come back in and mandate that we have some paper pushers in here. Stat. Obviously, they're trying to keep the characters there because they want them to have more interaction because that is what's interesting about the show. So.
Yeah, it just seems like they're like literally like it's as if Santos is like it's like so ridiculous. It's as if she's like feeding the paper and drops it on the floor again. Oops! It's like okay, all right, people. Like, how long can you drag this out for? What'd you think about McKay and like kind of this little moment she has where she's like, I was planning to go try to meet up with this date. It's supposed to be between 9 and 10. Actually, now that I'm thinking about this, I'm doing the math in my head. She actually has a chance where we could actually see her leave the ER and maybe go to that museum and run into that guy because that would be the next hour. But she makes it sound like she's like, I'm trying to think, am I actually going to try to make an effort or am I just going to go home and get, what is her 3 Bs? A book, bath, and bed, of course. Yeah.
100%. That's what I would be doing. There'd be no book. It would be bath, bed. That's it. I'm done. 2 Bs, good enough. No going out on a date. Sorry, Victor. I'm not going on a date with you.
But the book too, by the way, like, can you imagine like you just had this 15-hour day and you go home and like whatever, like if she takes public transportation to get home, like whatever amount of time that is to be like, and now I'm going to break out a book. It's like, I'll just go right into bed.
Maybe she'll read the book on the subway before she gets in the bath.
Yes.
That's the only way the 3 Bs make sense here.
What'd you think about that moment with Javadi? Again, this intersects with McKay, who's been this interesting kind of like a Greek chorus in some ways of like commenting on other characters' actions in an intriguing way, the way they've used her in this particular season. But what did you think about her where she is defending Javadi, who's making a video and Robbie sees her and he's all like very, boomer of him to be like, okay, yeah, he's not a boomer, I guess. He's like my age, so he's not a boomer, but almost a boomer. And being like, okay, you little ticky-tocks, get off your little ticky-tocks, whatever. And not realizing that what she's actually doing is she's trying to like get information to track down where Jesse might be the nurse that they took from the ICE took away.
I agree with Robbie though in this case.
Yeah.
Like
this is not the time for that. But she's off shift at this point.
She's off shift, but she's still there.
Just go outside. She's
still there. Like start scanning some charts, do your video when you're out of the hospital. Get out of the hospital. This seems like we're mulling around when we shouldn't be mulling around.
But if she wasn't making a TikTok, if she was actually like talking to someone, like FaceTiming with someone who had a piece of information, you probably would take the call, right? Even if you were in the middle of scanning a chart.
No, I wouldn't. That's why.
I don't know. When your phone rings, you immediately, it doesn't matter what we're doing, you have to go to the phone immediately.
That's not true. What I'm saying is I don't often have time to answer personal things during work hours because I'm trying to get through the day. I save that all for my day off. That's why I need 1 day off a week so I can actually be a person.
You're of a different generation, though, than Javadi.
That is true. We do have a different generation of...
You're more than twice as old. I've done the math.
No. Right. She's only 21.
She's only 21.
Okay, fine. I'm double her age. I am closer to Robbie. Fine.
What did you think? This was a very weird moment in the episode towards the end where, there was some tension between Santos and Whitaker, but then they kind of made amends and he kind of got some warmth from her in the fact that she's reluctantly admitting that, and we know other things that are going on as well, probably better for him to stay there and keep her company. But all of a sudden he lost his ID. And it's weird that, Whitaker has been shown as this mentor in many ways, like kind of like the next Robbie to be on the show. And then we have him show up with still his student ID earlier in the season, all the way at the beginning. And then like really not reverting back to the kind of what did she call him? Hucklebee or whatever she called him, Huckleberry.
Yeah.
She called him back in season 1. So really not that kind of like dopey, out of his depth country kid who's like goofing off or goofing up, I should say. And then here it's like almost like come full circle where it's like now that his shift is over, he's like back to like, I lost my ID and I just got it. Like it's so funny because it's like, that's like basically where we started, where he shows up with his student badge still and they give him his ID finally and then he loses it. And but in the middle, he's like, been a mentor for everybody and even put Langdon in his place earlier this episode.
Listen, I have lost my hospital ID.
You lose it every day.
No, that's not true. You revert to like childish behavior because you realize like you have to swipe in and swipe out. You can't open doors. You can't like get anywhere without your ID. So it's like completely incapacitating. You use it to scan yourself into the chart. So that was a comment made by Santos or McKay, one of them. Like, how are you going to get into the computer? Do you know your do you physically know your password? Because we swipe every time we log in and out. So it is incapacitating, and it's like turned him back into like the medical student mess that he was. So I sympathize with him. I have lost my hospital ID. I once dropped an ID that went into a patient's bed, and 2 weeks he was in the hospital in the same room in the ICU. And then when they moved him out of the ICU, I got a phone call from the charge nurse that we found your ID, Kim, 2 weeks later. I obviously had gotten a new ID by then, but it's terrible, Victor. You don't know.
One of the weirdest things that happened here in the show, because it seemed to be maybe just like a little lighter reprieve in the context of the show, it didn't tie into anything else, was this bar fight that broke out over, who was it? Oh man, who sang Mr. Roboto?
Oh yeah.
Sticks, yeah. Fighting over Sticks. It's so funny because I only remember Mr. Roboto, and then they're listing all these other songs. I'm like, oh yeah, they did have other songs. I forgot. But they got into a fight about Sticks, and this is a vicious fight. This guy put a flag through this guy's chest and punctured his lung, while the other guy's like cheek is split open with a bottle of Yingling. Was it?
Rolling Rock.
Rolling Rock. Yeah.
She was pulling green glass out of his cheek, and they were trying to figure out what kind of beer it was. That was funny. The answer was Rolling Rock.
That's right.
But yeah, bottle. Some serious injuries there. See, you finally got your July 4th outside of the firework injuries.
No fireworks. I'm not surprised. Well, the one,
previously,
the finger.
The fingers, yes. Now, an American flag through the chest, that's your July 4th injury.
He's waving a flag in a whole different way.
Yes.
Most inappropriate way possible.
Can't you just get this out of me? No! Going to the operating room.
All right, so if you got a collapsed lung in that situation, what happened? What would happen if you just pulled it out?
You also don't know what else is potentially.
Could be something else.
Like something could be tamponaded. So whatever other, or where was it? In the middle of his chest? You don't even know. Like he could have blood around his heart. We don't know.
Yeah.
Although they always do ultrasounds of everything in the show. So I don't think they had a comment on whether there was like blood around his heart or anything. But still, you don't want to pull it out until you're in a controlled operating room where you can make an incision and control bleeding. Remember when Ogilvy took the piece of glass out of the man's mid-back?
That's right.
And then arterial bleeding started? You never want to pull out a foreign body unless you're in a controlled setting.
Oh, a few things I wanted to circle back to. I'm just looking at my notes here. One was I liked when Javadi when Robbie confronts Javadi, and Javadi turns things around on him. And she's like, yeah, things were different when you were starting out. There was no cell phones. There was no internet. There was nothing. And he's like, there were cell phones eventually.
Yeah. As a 50-ish ER doctor, you didn't have cell phones until you were in your mid-20s, probably.
Oh, and I wrote down that early on, I know you love Clue. That's why I wrote it down.
That was my favorite line. I can't believe I forgot about it. She said something about, was it Colonel Mustard in the library? And Whitaker has absolutely no idea what she's talking about.
She's like, she doesn't have a clue. And I was like, oh, Kim loves Clue.
And so does our daughter.
She inherited that. It's genetic.
We got the master version, and there's more characters.
Too many rooms.
Too many rooms, too many people. But Colonel Mustard's still there. Clue the movie is also very entertaining. If you haven't watched it, I would recommend it.
Oh, and something I wanted to bring up last week, and I forgot to bring up. So they circle back to it here. Speaking of that kind of like shoehorning in social issues, which again, I think it's good that they touch on these issues. It's just so incredibly indelicate. The mentioning that this asthmatic kid from last week, that the mom had mentioned that she had lost her Medicaid, right? And now they're giving her a combo inhaler. Mm-hmm. And she says it's going to be too expensive, but there are ways that they can help subsidize it. So again, touching on these issues, but I forgot, like there was a whole digression last week, very subtle digression on how she had lost her Medicaid. But do you see that where patients are somehow like, how does that happen? Where someone like falls in the gap? What do they earn too much money? Like what is that happens where someone transitions between having Medicaid and then not?
I mean, you have to reapply for Medicaid, just like you have to re-up your commercial insurance or your job every year. You have to reapply. I've never applied for Medicaid, so I don't exactly know the process. But if it expires and your paperwork isn't in on time, then you have to be reprocessed.
So this was purely a matter. In her case, it's just that she didn't apply in time.
She's not saying that she can get other insurance through her work. She's a hairdresser, so she doesn't have insurance apparently. So for some reason, it was explained in a better way than what I'm explaining in previous episodes about what happened with it. It could have been some of her money was under the table, and then maybe she reported more money, so maybe they didn't qualify, but she didn't go to the healthcare marketplace, so she was kind of in some sort of zone where maybe she didn't qualify. Maybe it wasn't just paperwork.
Yeah, I don't remember all the details of it either now, because we probably should have touched on it last week, but I forgot to bring it up. But that is weird, because I've known of people in the past that have that situation where it's like, if you earn too much, you lose your Medicaid, which I think is a really weird way that Medicaid is set up, where it's like you discourage people from working, where it's like, you shouldn't lose your Medicaid because you worked. like you should probably encourage the working. The idea of basically being like, oh, now that you, for example, a hairdresser who gets paid under the table, and also you want to collect your payroll taxes and such. If you're the government, you want to encourage people to report their income. And so that idea that you would be like, well, you're trying to discourage that. And especially when these hairdressers might like cut hair in 3 different places and just work part-time and have no insurance anywhere. And you want them to pay for insurance on the marketplace or stay on Medicaid so they can work more hours. It's like, seems to be logical, but the system is oftentimes not logical at all in the way it's implemented.
Yeah, there's like a certain percentage of the population who like they make too much money to qualify for charity care. They don't qualify for Medicaid because they make too much money, but they don't make enough money to support a family and buy commercial insurance. So like when the Obamacare tax credits went away, there was like 12 million Americans that suddenly were in pure panic state because they couldn't figure out how to buy similar insurance plans because the tax credits went away.
It's like $12,000 extra in your healthcare premiums are basically like what you would pay in rent in a year. And you're like, well, how can I pay my rent and feed my family and pay for these new premiums?
Exactly.
It's a mess. It's such a mess. But speaking of that USC guideline that they gave them, there was also a very interesting follow-up where they are, as ham-fisted as these things can be, there's some really positive things that come from the success of this show. Which again, I love the show, even though I can be critical of certain aspects of it. But they had mentioned, for example, that after last season's episode where the son died, there was a 25% increase in people looking to change their status as organ donors. 25% increase among people who watched the show. I think it was 25% in general. So the huge impact when you think about the percentage of people who watch the show that probably directly impact that. And there was a 38% increase and I think it was around 38% or something of people who were asked follow-up questions with their doctors and just, I guess, internet searches as well about end-of-life directives, like having that more well-defined. Once again, these are after season 1, so I don't know what the impact of touching on some of these issues in season 2, what the impact might be. This was a study that was done after people watched season 1. So anyway, all that is to say that it's not subtle, but it has...
it's making people think about these important things, organ donation and advanced care planning, end-of-life planning. Those are discussions that everyone should have. So if people are having more conversations about it, that's good.
And a popular show, if they think about showing these things. I mean, this is a very weird thing to connect it to, but I don't know if you remember, but when Baywatch, back in the day, Baywatch, which was very, very popular, was very focused many times on like showing you how to do CPR. And many people, like kids, like little kids, would do CPR on each other, save people's lives, because they're like, I learned it from watching Baywatch. So sometimes it's
TV is a positive influence in some cases.
Or negative. It's an influence. Like anything else, could be positive or negative. And then that's it. Any predictions do you think it's going to be a very quiet end of season? Something's going to have to happen here. And when I say something's going to happen, I don't mean like someone's going to come in with a giant fireworks explosion or something. I mean, there's got to be something the show does. Like, I would actually like this. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would love to see these people. What a surprise would it be to see them leave the ER next week and we see them, like McKay goes, maybe decides to go meet with that guy. Robbie goes home. What's his home life like? Is anyone there? Is he alone? What does he do when he gets home? Like, I'd be very curious to see these people like in a home circumstance, like outside of.
So far, they have not done any of that.
Nothing. That's what I thought it would be a twist on the formula. I think it would be something interesting to do.
That would be interesting. I would like to see Robbie's apartment. I would like to see McKay go on a date. I would like to see
Dana with her husband.
Oh yeah, Dana. I would also like to see Whitaker go back to Santos's house and just like hang out and watch a movie with her so that she's safe.
Well, apparently he's going to go to see the farmer lady first.
I know.
He's going to go plant some seeds.
It's real nice, Victor. Plug your ears, everybody. But I don't think we're going to see that. I think because now it's already hour 14. It's going to be hour 15 and we still see like the preview for next episode. They're still there.
Yeah.
They're all still there.
Well, I mean, that's where, I'm curious if there's something misleading in remember, like previously on the season, there'd be like, they showed Robbie like going after Hashimi, confronting her as if it was going to be like a big culminating moment. And I'm like, because they were in the middle of that conversation, I'm like, I bet you that is the first scene of the next episode. And that's exactly what it was. Like the big scene in the trailer for the next episode was like the very first 5 minutes of the next episode. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're showing us this, but there's got to be something else. If there is something, they're not teasing all of it. But I would like to see them outside of the hospital. That would be a cool way to twist the formula a little bit.
That would be a good way to kind of pull it all together for the end of the season too. So you see them as people outside of being doctors. Maybe we've changed Robbie's mind by the end of next episode.
I do hope so. All right, so that's it. One more week. Also, DTF St. Louis is wrapping up this week as well. That show's become very popular for us here on the podcast. Also, The Paradise, the finale, very popular here on the podcast. So if you're catching up on that, check that out as well. Euphoria is coming back, and we're going to cover, Darren and I are going to cover the premiere episode also coming tomorrow. So a lot of episodes coming in the next few days covering all of that. And Sona and I still have to talk about Your Friends and Neighbors, episode 2, which I honestly have not been able to finish. So I'm not loving this second season so far, but I'll finish it and talk about it with Sona, and we'll see what we'll be covering in the near future. A couple things we'll be watching. Susie, this one's for you if you're still listening. We'll be covering Beef. She wants Darren to talk to me, but maybe we'll talk about it and Darren. Maybe all three of us can talk.
That would be a lot.
You get to talk with Darren for the first time.
I would like to talk to Darren. That would be fun.
We live together. We could actually talk to him at the same time.
We do?
You forgot.
How could I forget?
And so expect all that in the near future. And of course, finale of Pitt next week. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for the conversation, Kimmy.
See you next week, Victor.
See you next week. I won't see you till then. Bye.
Bye.